Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm filling in for Dave Belton. He couldn't be here today. I bring before you today House Resolution 1430. Basically, there's a city in Burlington, Vermont that has passed a resolution requesting the Air Force relocate F-35s that are stationed there at the National Guard base. And basically, this resolution is just encouraging the Air Force to deploy the F-35 jets at one of our bases here in Georgia. We've got Dobbins, Robbins, Moody, and Hunter Airfield could all accommodate these jets, so we would love to have them here in Georgia. That's what this resolution does.
Thank you. Representative, are you aware of whether the base that these were originally scheduled to go to, is that base closing? Is it just that they don't want to expand and can't sustain themselves with these? What's going on? Do you actually know?
I think they're concerned about the noise issue there. It's kind of disturbing their sleep, and we would, to me, that's the sound of freedom, and we welcome them here.
I certainly agree with you. I tell them to bring the noise.
Bring the noise.
Representative Diffenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the question I have, are any of the bases in Georgia, have they been contacted? Have they said they would do this or
I don't know if they've been contacted, but I do know of one base here that was in the short list for one squadron of F-35s that got stationed somewhere else, not this particular group here, but I know we have the basis to accommodate them. But okay. I don't know if anybody's been contacted.
But one was on the short list to get it?
Yes.
Okay, so at least one of them have requested the units to be here.
I'd already looked at this and heard your presentations the other day, and I'm sure any base would not turn down.
That is correct. Any of the four bases, anywhere, any of the four in Georgia, we'd be glad to have them.
And the bases would be glad to have them.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Glavin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
Sure. The only thing I would like to say is, I've read a little bit about this, and they're replacing the F-16s, but there are 4 other bases that are on the waiting list right now. And we may not get this one, even if it doesn't go there, but there are going to be subsequent assignments of F-35s across this country, and to get on the waiting list, I think, is a positive thing. So, Representative?
No, I'm supposed to be out.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody in the audience want to say anything? Yes, go ahead.
Representative, do you know what the estimated economic impact of this one mission, if it landed in any one of our Georgia bases, what it would be?
I don't know the total dollar value. Like I say, Dave asked me yesterday afternoon, could I do this for him? He had something that come up. I know I heard him last week in the well, and I want to think it's like a $500 million
every year
impact every year.
Thank you.
As I recollect, it's about 500 permanent personnel, and that's a significant impact.
Yes.
Motion to pass.
Got a motion to pass. Any discussion? Got a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes. The second bill we've got here, the second resolution, 1612, is, as I explained earlier, is a little unique. It deals with Camp Pendleton and the contaminated water that's been going on there since apparently about the 50s. Is it Camp Lejeune, I'm sorry. Well, I was stationed there in 1965, and I drank some of that water, so I've registered as required, but it's only been read once. We have to read it again tomorrow, and as I explained earlier, what I'd like to do is just give the opportunity for everybody to hear it And then after we conclude tomorrow, we'd like to move to the ante room and then vote it when everybody completely understands it. So Representative Prince, step up front.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is, as the chairman said, an urgent resolution to the federal government. Basically, over about 30 years ago, it was discovered that the water facilities in the Camp Lejeune area, whether it's from the fuel piece or also some cleaners and things like that, they got some contamination into the water system. And this right here is just urging the federal government to take some necessary whatever precautions as well, not just the precautions, but also maybe go back and see what we can do to help those veterans and family members who were there around the time that had been exposed there. Some have, I think it's about 8 deaths according to the resolution that have since then that can be linked back to the water system at that time. So basically we just ask them to take the necessary precautions to see what we can rectify the best we can. Now, again, this was about 30 years ago, so the water system there now is good, and it's been good for a while. So they basically fixed the issue as far as the water, but actually going back, helping the veterans and those family members is what this, again, is an urging resolution is what it is. Any questions?
Thank you, Representative Prince. My question is, and it may call for us to make some, maybe an adjustment or amendment to this resolution. It specifically targets Marines and their families. However, there were members of other services, whether it was joint missions or et cetera, that were actually assigned to Camp Lejeune during this period of time. And so do we need, in the wisdom of the chair, do we need to amend this to include the 900,000 Marines and any other service members that have spent significant time at Camp Lejeune? Because with this, we're only specifically talking about Marines. And we know that there are Marines on Army bases and Army and on Marine bases. So what's, any comments on that?
I'll tell you, since you basically opened that up, which I think is a great observation, but as we talk about service members and their families, but we also have to talk about the federal employees that also work there with DOD. So again, I'm sure Representative Elam would definitely adhere to that.
And so, follow up, Mr. Chairman. And so, with this being an urgent resolution, then we want to urge them to not only look out for the 900,000 Marines and their families, but to other military personnel that might have been assigned there, as well as their families and DOD civilians. And so I would ask council to help me out here in regards to introducing an amendment to this that would include those populations I just spoke about.
And I have a question for council, since since the bill's only been
Turn them on.
read once, do we have the ability to amend it here in this meeting that where we can't vote on it?
Chairman, I believe the amendment would need to be offered after it has had its second reading.
Okay.
I could, this body could direct me to go ahead and prepare that and have it ready to go, and I'd be glad to do that, Mr. Chairman.
I think that would be very appropriate. If you get
Likewise.
together with, and I think it ought to be all civilian personnel who are assigned to the base, all military personnel, having been there. You know, the Navy provides corpsmen and chaplains, doctors, dentists, and
Air Force drive.
Coast Guard was there for a pretty good while when we used to use their small boats to practice amphibious landings. So, okay, Representative Deffenbaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. The question I have is this problem restricted just to the base water facilities or the community as well?
From my understanding, it was on the base. It was
It was
community.
only
Yes, it was on the
base.
base. It was on the base community. And that,
Thank
again,
you.
from the fuel as well as some cleaners that was located right directly outside the gate.
Okay, thank you.
That's also my understanding. You know, they have one significant well there and,
Significant well.
provides water for the whole division. Representative Scott.
Good morning. I would just like to thank you all for this bill because I do have some constituents that are really, really suffering from this contaminated water in Camp Lejeune, and they're just really having an uphill battle with the VA and from this. So I'm glad to see this resolution going forward because this is it's really bigger than what we know it is to be. And I just wish that all the soldiers could get the help that they need from this contaminated water because my constituent is having a hard time in and out the VA. And now they telling her she need to go to the private doctor. So it's just rough on her at this time. So I'm glad to see that this resolution is going forward. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like she's already met with the VA, but there's a specific requirement that if you were at Camp Lejeune during this time frame, you have to go in and register with the VA in case anything does come about. I've gone and registered myself, and Representative Elam told me he'd gone and registered. So
That's true.
Yeah, she was the one that they did the news story on TV, was one of the ones about the Camp Lejeune. So she registered and all of that. They're just going through the process. All right, thank you all.
Representative Clark.
Just to address that amendment that was, that my colleague to my right was mentioning, I think down in line 21, we would have to change that area to the additional needs of our veterans, their families, and put in the federal employees at that location as well. So it's up in line 12 and probably line 21.
Good
Oh.
catch.
And I think we probably need to do that once we adjourn here today and go ahead and bring it up and have it ready for when we meet tomorrow afternoon.
Cool.
Any additional questions? Any comments from anybody in the audience? Hearing none, I guess we're adjourned then, since we can't take any action. Thank you.